The Elder spoke of humanity's vengeance. The Galactic Overlooked. Part 5. The Elder's Warning. The galaxy held its breath. After the Dravari war machine was dismantled, every species waited to see what humanity would do next. Some expected them to turn on the Union. Others expected them to claim Dravari territory for themselves. A few species quietly began building up their own defenses, afraid that the humans would come for them too. Fear spread through the galactic community like a cold wind. Diplomats could not sleep. Military commanders studied human fleet movements every hour. News channels across 1,000 worlds asked the same question over and over. What do the humans want? The answer came 3 weeks after the last Dravari military base was destroyed. Admiral Tejo stood on the bridge of the Remembrance and gave a single order. All ships set course for Earth. We are going home. Yuna looked at him. She had known this was coming. She had known it from the moment they left Earth. She relayed the command, and 12,000 ships turned away from Dravari space and began the long journey back to their own solar system. The galaxy could not understand it. The humans had won. They had the most powerful fleet in known space. They had weapons that no species could defend against. They had proven that they could fight and win against any enemy. And they were leaving. They were going home. The Union sent messages, dozens of them. They offered Earth full membership. They offered a permanent seat on the High Council. They offered trade deals, technology exchanges, and military alliances. They offered everything they had denied for decades, wrapped in polite language and urgent tones. Earth did not respond to any of them. On the journey home, Tejo visited the lower decks of the Remembrance. He walked through the halls where the crew lived and worked. Young faces looked up at him as he passed. Some saluted, some simply nodded. He saw Mireille in her lab, still working on improvements to the Lance system, even though the war was over. She looked tired but calm. He saw Cuban in the tactical room, reviewing battle data with his team. Cuban looked up and gave him that strange smile of his, the one that never quite reached his eyes. Tejo found Hana in the engine room. She was sitting on the floor with her back against a wall, drinking water from a metal cup. She had not slept in 3 days. The fleet's engines were her children, and she watched over them constantly. "We won," Tejo said, sitting down beside her. Hana nodded slowly. "Then why does it feel so heavy?" Tejo did not answer right away. He thought about the 58,000 names carved into the stone wall beneath the mountains of Gangwon. He thought about Do-hyun's scarred hands. He thought about Jisoo, still listening to the stars from her station, still recording everything. He thought about President Eunji, who had died 10 years into Project Forge, her 5 words still echoing through history. "Because winning was never the point," he said finally. "Making sure it never happens again. That was the point." Hana looked at him for a long moment, then closed her eyes and rested her head against the wall. They sat together in the hum of the engines and said nothing more. When the fleet arrived back in Earth's solar system, they were greeted by silence. No parades, no celebrations, no crowds cheering in the streets. Earth's people watched the ships come home on their screens, and felt something that was not joy and not sadness, but something in between. Relief, maybe. The kind of feeling that comes when you have carried something impossibly heavy for a very long time, and you finally set it down. Do-hyun was waiting at the landing port when Tejo's shuttle touched down. He was 87 years old, bent and slow, leaning on a cane made from metal salvaged from New Busan. He had carried that cane for 40 years. Tejo walked down the ramp and stopped in front of him. The two men looked at each other. They did not salute. They did not shake hands. Tejo simply placed his hand on Do-hyun's shoulder, and Do-hyun placed his on Tejo's. They stood like that for a long time, while the wind blew around them. Earth closed its borders, not with anger, not with threats, but with a quiet firmness that the galaxy found more frightening than any weapon. Human ships patrolled the edges of their system. Sensors watched every direction. The fleet was maintained at full strength. But no human ship crossed into galactic space, and no invitation to do so was accepted. The only message Earth sent to the galaxy was short. It was broadcast once, on every frequency, in every known language. It said, "Next time, answer." Then there was silence. Vorath slapped speaking. The stars above the floating rocks had shifted slightly during his telling. The young Talani sat still. Their faces changed. They looked older somehow, the way people look when they have heard something that rearranges the inside of their minds. One of the young ones, a female with silver-green skin and wide, careful eyes, spoke first. "What happened to the humans after that?" Vorath tilted his head. "They are still there, on their little blue planet, behind their closed borders. They trade with no one. They speak to no one. They simply exist, quiet and watchful, like a scar on the galaxy's conscience. And the Union? The Union changed their laws after the human war. They created a new rule that says no distress signal from any species can be ignored, regardless of membership status." Vorath paused. "They call it the Tejo Protocol. The humans did not ask for it. They do not care about it. But the Union needed to name their shame after someone, and Tejo seemed fitting." Another young one asked, "Could the humans have taken over? Could they have ruled the galaxy if they wanted?" Vorath was quiet for a moment. "Yes," he said simply, "and that is what makes them so terrifying. They had the power to take everything, and they chose to take nothing. They did not want the galaxy. They wanted the galaxy to remember what it did, and what it failed to do." He looked at each of the young Talani in turn, his 4 orange eyes glowing softly. "There is a lesson in this story, and I need you to carry it with you for the rest of your lives. The galaxy is full of species that are loud and proud and powerful. They build empires and fight wars and make themselves known. But the most dangerous species in this galaxy is not the one that roars the loudest. It is the one that suffers in silence. Because when the silent ones finally speak, they do not use words." He stood slowly, his old joints cracking. The young ones stood with him. The dying stars above them pulsed, once, twice, then faded a little more. Vorath pulled his cloak tighter around his thin body and turned to walk away. "Elder," one of the young ones called after him, "do you think the humans will ever come back?" Vorath stopped. He did not turn around. His voice, when he answered, was barely above a whisper, but every young Talani heard it clearly. "They never left. They are watching. They are always watching, and they will never forget." He walked into the dark between the stars, and the young ones watched him go. None of them spoke. The silence around them felt different now. It felt like it had teeth. It felt like it had memory. It felt like somewhere, very far away, on a small blue world, orbiting an ordinary star, someone was looking back at them through the dark. The Elder spoke of humanity's vengeance, the galactic overlooked. Part 4. The Return. The first species to see the human fleet was the Pelori, a peaceful trading people who ran cargo routes along the outer edge of Union space. A Pelori cargo captain named Thess was hauling mineral ore through a quiet stretch of nothing when his scanner made a sound it had never made before. He looked at the screen and saw contacts. Not 1, not 10, not 100, thousands, tens of thousands. The contacts stretched across his scanner like a dark curtain being pulled across the stars. Thess tried to identify the ships. His system searched through every known ship signature in the galactic database. Nothing matched. The ships were unknown. They were black, nearly invisible, and they moved through space in perfect formation, like a single living thing made of metal and silence. Thess did what any reasonable being would do. He sent a message to the nearest Union relay station. Unknown fleet, massive in size, heading toward Central Union space. Please advise. Then he turned his ship around and flew in the other direction, as fast as his engines could carry him. The Union received his message and dismissed it. A fleet of that size appearing from nowhere was impossible. They sent a scout ship to investigate. The scout ship arrived at the coordinates and found nothing. The fleet had already moved. It was faster than anything the Union had on record. 12 hours later, the fleet appeared at the edge of Dravari-controlled space. On the bridge of the Remembrance, Admiral Tejo sat in his command chair and studied the tactical display. He was 74 years old now. His hair was white, and his face was lined with decades of work, grief, and waiting. But his eyes were sharp and steady, and his hands did not shake. Beside him, Commander Yuna monitored the fleet's formation. She was 71, and had not slowed down at all. If anything, the years had made her more focused, more precise. She ran the fleet's operations the way a conductor runs an orchestra, with absolute control and complete attention to every detail. Behind them, on screens that covered every wall of the bridge, the fleet was displayed in full. 12,416 warships, arranged in Cuban swarm doctrine formation. Each ship was crewed by men and women who had trained for this moment their entire lives. Each ship carried Mire's lance weapons. Each ship bore a name on its hull. The names were those of the dead from New Busan, Hanul Station, and the mining outpost. Every single ship was a memorial. Tejo opened a wideband communication channel. It was a frequency that every species in the galaxy could receive. He did not ask for permission. He did not announce himself. He did not threaten or demand. The file contained 58,000 names. Each name was followed by a date of birth, a home city, and the word murdered. The file played on a loop, broadcasting across the galaxy like a heartbeat. The Dravari Dominion received the transmission and responded the way they always responded to anything. They sent their war fleet. The Dravari Armada was enormous, over 20,000 ships, each one built for destruction. They had conquered dozens of species with this fleet. They had never lost a major battle. Their commander, a scarred veteran named Drothak, looked at the human fleet on his display and felt something he had not felt in a very long time. He did not recognize it as fear, because he had forgotten what fear felt like. He ordered his fleet to attack. The two fleets met in the space between two dead planets. It should not have been a battle. By every galactic standard, it should have been a slaughter. The Dravari had numbers, experience, and size on their side. Their ships were larger, their weapons were heavier, and their soldiers had been fighting wars since before humans had built their first airplane. None of that mattered. The moment the Dravari fleet came within range, Yuna gave the order, all ships, execute Pattern 7. 12,000 human ships split apart like a flock of birds. They scattered in every direction, forming hundreds of smaller groups that moved with impossible speed and coordination. The Dravari fired their weapons into the chaos, hitting nothing. The human ships were too fast, too small, and too spread out. The Dravari's targeting systems could not keep up. Then, the lances fired. The first wave of light hit the center of the Dravari formation. Ships did not explode. They did not break apart. They simply stopped. Their lights went out. Their engines died. Inside, everything that had been solid became fire. The lances passed through shields and armor as if they did not exist. One moment, a Dravari warship was a functional machine of war. The next moment, it was a hollow shell drifting in the dark. Drothak watched his fleet die and did not understand what was happening. His ships were being destroyed by weapons that his sensors could not even detect. He ordered a retreat. His ships tried to turn. The human fleet did not let them. Cuban's formations closed around the Dravari like a fist, cutting off every escape route. The swarm moved as one, striking from above, below, and every side at once. The battle lasted 11 hours. It was not a battle, it was a lesson. When it was over, the Dravari armada was gone. 20,000 ships, reduced to floating metal and silence. The human fleet had lost 312 ships. Each loss was felt. Each crew was mourned. But the fleet held its formation and did not stop. Colony after colony, station after station, the Dravari military was taken apart with surgical precision. The humans did not bomb cities. They did not attack civilians. They targeted only military installations, warship factories, and weapons depots. They dismantled the Dravari war machine the way a person takes apart a clock, piece by piece, with patience and purpose. The Galactic Union watched all of this in complete shock. Emergency sessions were called. Diplomats shouted at each other. Admirals studied the battle recordings and could not believe what they were seeing. A species they had classified as primitive had just destroyed the most feared military power in the galaxy in less than 2 weeks. The Union sent a diplomatic convoy to meet with the human fleet. 12 ships carrying ambassadors, advisors, and senior officials. They approached the Remembrance and requested permission to board. Tejo granted it. He met them in the ship's main hall. He stood alone, wearing a simple black uniform with no medals or decorations. On his chest, above his heart, was a small patch that bore the number 58,000. The lead ambassador, a tall being from a species called the Verith, stepped forward and spoke with careful respect. Admiral Tejo, the Galactic Union wishes to open negotiations. We would like to discuss terms for your integration into the Union, trade agreements, and a seat on the Council. Tejo looked at the ambassador for a long moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device. He pressed a button. The device played a recording. It was the distress signal from New Busan. The screaming, the explosions, the woman begging for help. It played for 30 seconds in the silent hall, and every ambassador in the room stood frozen. Tejo turned off the recording and put the device back in his pocket. "We sent that message to you 40 years ago," he said. His voice was calm and even. "You did not answer." He turned and walked out of the hall. The meeting was over. Vorath described the look on the ambassadors' faces to the young Talani. They looked, the elder said, like people who had just realized that the house they had been living in was built on a crack in the earth. And the crack had finally opened. H1. The elder spoke of humanity's vengeance, the galactic overlooked. H2. Part 3. The Quiet Forge. After the colonies burned, the galaxy expected Earth to collapse. Every analyst, every diplomat, and every intelligence officer in the Galactic Union made the same prediction. The humans would fall apart. They would fight among themselves, as they always did. Their grief would turn inward, and within a generation they would fade into nothing. A minor species on a minor planet, too broken to matter. For a while, it looked like they were right. Earth went quiet. The signals stopped. The petitions to the Union stopped. The trade requests, the diplomatic messages, the scientific exchanges that humans had tried so hard to maintain with neighboring systems, all of it stopped. Earth pulled back everything it had beyond its own solar system. Ships returned home. Outposts were abandoned. The few human traders who worked in alien ports packed their things and left without a word. The galaxy noticed the silence, the way a person notices a small noise stopping. For a moment, they thought about it. Then, they forgot. 40 years is a long time for most species. Entire governments rose and fell. Wars were fought and treaties signed. The Dravari dominion continued to expand, swallowing smaller worlds one by one. And the Union continued to do nothing about it, because the Dravari were useful trading partners when they were not busy destroying things. The galaxy moved on. Earth did not move on. Earth got to work. Tejo was 45 when the project began. He had been promoted to admiral after the colonies fell, not because he wanted the rank, but because no one else was willing to carry the weight of what came next. He stood in an underground room beneath the mountains of Gangwon, surrounded by military officers, scientists, and engineers. On the wall behind him were the names of the 58,000 dead. They were carved into the stone, every single one. He looked at those names every day before he started work. It was the first thing he did every morning. Beside him stood Yuna, now a commander herself. The years had not softened her anger. They had sharpened it into something precise and cold, like a blade kept in a freezer. She ran the tactical division of what they called Project Forge. The name was simple, because the purpose was simple. They were building a military force that would make the galaxy remember the name of every person carved into that wall. The project had 3 pillars. The first was ships. Earth's old vessels were slow, fragile, and outdated by galactic standards. They needed something completely new. The person who solved this problem was an engineer named Hana. She was 32 years old, quiet, and so focused on her work that she often forgot to eat for entire days. Her team worked in secret shipyards hidden in the shadow of Jupiter, the largest planet in Earth's system. The shipyards were built inside hollowed-out asteroids, invisible to any scanner. Over 15 years, Hana designed a fleet of warships unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. She did not try to copy alien technology. She studied it, understood its weaknesses, and built something different. Her ships were smaller than most galactic warships, but faster, harder to detect, and built with a level of redundancy that bordered on madness. Every system had 3 backups. Every weapon had 2 alternatives. Every hull was layered with materials that could absorb, reflect, or redirect energy attacks. The ships were painted black, because Hana said that if they were going to come out of the dark, they should look like the dark. The second pillar was weapons. This was where a young woman named Mireille changed everything. She was only 23 when she joined Project Forge, a physicist who had been studying faster-than-light energy manipulation in a university lab. When the military found her research, they brought her underground and gave her unlimited resources. Within 5 years, she had invented something she called a lance. It was a focused beam of energy that traveled at faster-than-light speeds and hit its target before the target even knew it had been fired. It ignored shields, it passed through armor, it turned the inside of a ship into fire without ever touching the outside. Mireille did not celebrate when she finished the weapon. She sat in her lab alone and stared at the prototype for a long time. She knew what it would be used for. She had lost an uncle on New Busan. She built it anyway. The third pillar was strategy. The galaxy's military tactics had not changed in centuries. Most species fought the same way. Big fleets, big guns, direct confrontation. It was simple and predictable, and it had worked for 1,000 years. A man named Cuban intended to break it. Cuban was a tactician, a former professor of military history who had studied every war humans had ever fought against each other. He was thin, calm, and had a habit of smiling at the wrong moments. His colleagues found him unsettling. His enemies would find him terrifying. He designed a way of fighting that used Earth's small fleet size as an advantage. Instead of meeting the enemy head-on, his formations would split, surround, confuse, and destroy. Ships would appear from multiple directions at once, fire their lances, and vanish before the enemy could respond. He called it the Swarm Doctrine. It required incredible coordination, perfect timing, and pilots who were willing to fly into impossible situations without hesitation. So they trained pilots, young men and women who had grown up hearing the names of the dead, who had watched Do-hyun's recordings in school, who had been raised on the 5 words President Unji had spoken. They trained in simulators first, then in real ships in the empty space beyond Neptune. They trained in the cold and the dark, far from the eyes of the galaxy, until they could execute Cubans' formations in their sleep. Do-hyun was still alive. He was old now, his body broken from the years and the injuries he had carried since New Busan. He could not fly or fight anymore. But he visited the training camps. He walked among the young pilots and told them what he had seen. He showed them his hands, still scarred from digging graves. He did not tell them to fight for revenge. He told them to fight so that no human would ever have to dig a grave alone again. She had become the head of Earth's intelligence network, a web of hidden sensors and listening devices that she had slowly spread across nearby space over the decades. She knew where every Dravari ship was. She knew the Union's patrol routes, their blind spots, and their response times. She had mapped the galaxy's weaknesses the way a doctor maps a body before surgery. Vorath told the young ones that for 40 years, Earth was like a furnace with the door closed. The fire inside grew hotter and hotter, but from the outside, there was nothing to see. No smoke, no light, no sound. The galaxy looked at Earth and saw a dead world. They saw a species that had given up. They could not have been more wrong. In the final year of Project Forge, Admiral Taeho stood in the command center of Earth's first completed warship. It was called the Remembrance. It was black as the space around it, and carried enough firepower to level a small moon. Behind it, in the shadow of Jupiter, 12,000 more ships waited in silence. Their engines were cold. Their weapons were charged. Their crews were ready. Taeho looked at the fleet through the bridge window. Yuna stood beside him, as she always had. Neither of them spoke. There was nothing left to say. They had spent 40 years preparing for this moment, and now that it was here, the only thing Taeho felt was a deep, heavy calm. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small piece of stone. It was from New Busan. Do-hyun had given it to him years ago. Taeho held it tight in his fist and whispered, "We are coming." The stars outside did not answer. They did not need to. The answer was already built, armed, and waiting in the dark. The elders spoke of humanity's vengeance, the galactic overlooked. Part 2. The Silence That Burned. Vorath's voice dropped lower as he told the next part. The young Talani leaned closer, their glowing eyes wide. The elder did not enjoy this part of the story. No one ever did. The 3 human colonies sat on small rocky worlds at the far edge of Earth's reach. They were not large. The biggest one, called New Busan, had about 40,000 people. The second, named Hanuel Station, held around 15,000. The third was just a mining outpost with 3,000 workers and their families. These people had left Earth to build something new. They were farmers, engineers, teachers, and miners. They had brought their children with them. They had planted trees in alien soil and built schools out of metal and hope. They had no warships. They had a few old patrol boats and some ground defense weapons that were designed to stop wild animals, not armies. The colonies had asked Earth for better protection many times, but Earth's military was small and spread thin. Taeho had written reports requesting more ships for the outer colonies. Every report was approved in theory and denied in budget. The Dravari came on a Tuesday. Jisoo was the first to pick up the signal. She was sitting at her station on the listening outpost, drinking cold tea and watching the same empty screen she watched every night. Then the screen lit up, not with one signal, but with hundreds. She set down her cup and leaned forward, her fingers moving fast across the controls. The signals were coming from the direction of New Busan. They were distress calls. Jisoo's blood went cold. She boosted the signal and listened. Through the static, she heard screaming. She heard explosions. She heard a woman shouting in Korean, begging someone to help, saying that ships were falling from the sky and burning everything. Then the signal cut out. Jisoo sent an emergency alert to Earth Command. Then she sent one to every Galactic Union relay station within range. The message was simple and clear. Human colonies under attack. Requesting immediate assistance. Civilians in danger. Please respond. No one responded. On Earth, Taeho received the alert in the middle of the night. He was out of bed and in the command center within minutes. Yuna was already there, her face pale and her jaw tight. The screens showed what little information they had. A massive fleet had entered the colonial zone. The ships matched known Dravari signatures. The attack was already underway. Taeho called for a response fleet. There was none ready. Earth's nearest warships were weeks away from the colonies. He contacted the Union directly, using every emergency channel they had. He identified himself, described the attack, and requested help under the Galactic Protection Accord, a treaty that said the Union would defend any populated world from unprovoked aggression. The Union did not answer. He sent the message again, and again, and again. For 6 hours, he sent the same message, while his people died in the dark. On New Busan, a man named Do-hyun fought with everything he had. He was a sergeant in the Colonial Guard, a unit of 50 soldiers who were trained to handle local problems, not full-scale invasions. The Dravari came in dropships, hundreds of them, falling like black rain. Their soldiers were twice the size of any human, covered in natural armor, with blade-like arms that cut through walls like paper. Do-hyun and his unit held a school building for 3 hours. Inside were over 200 children and their teachers. He set up barricades with desks and metal shelves. He used mining explosives as grenades. He fired until his weapon overheated, and then he picked up a metal pipe and kept fighting. It was not enough. It was never going to be enough. By the time the Dravari moved on, the school was rubble. Do-hyun pulled himself out of the dust with 2 broken ribs and 1 working arm. He looked around and saw nothing but smoke and silence. He found some survivors in a basement, not many. He walked through the ruins of New Busan for hours, looking for anyone alive. He found bodies in the streets, in houses, in gardens where flowers still grew between the cracks. He buried them with his bare hands, one by one. He dug into the alien soil with his fingers until they bled, and he placed each body into the ground and said their name out loud if he knew it. When he did not know their name, he said, "I am sorry." Hanul Station fell in 4 hours. The mining outpost lasted only 2. The Dravari did not take prisoners. They did not occupy the land. They simply destroyed everything and left. Later, Galactic analysts would say the attack was a territorial clearing. The Dravari wanted the space, not the people. The people were just in the way. Back on Earth, Commander Jisoo sat at her station and cried. She had listened to every signal from the colonies until they all went quiet. She had recorded everything, every scream, every explosion, every desperate call for help that no one answered. She saved the recordings because she believed that one day someone would need to hear them. Someone would need to know what silence sounded like when it killed people. Taeho stood in the command center long after it was over. The screens were dark. The channels were quiet. Yuna stood beside him, and for the first time since he had known her, she had no anger in her eyes. Something colder. 58,000 people, she said quietly. Taeho nodded, and nobody came. He nodded again. The news spread across Earth like wildfire. People watched the footage from the colonies. They saw the burning buildings, the broken ships, the empty streets. They saw Do-hyun's recordings, sent from his cracked helmet camera, showing him digging graves in the dirt. The world went quiet, in a way it had never gone quiet before. It was not the quiet of peace, it was the quiet of something breaking inside. The president of the United Earth Council was a woman named Unji. She was 50 years old, small in size, and known for being calm in every situation. She had negotiated treaties, managed disasters, and led Earth through hard times with a steady hand. But when she stepped up to address the world, her hands were shaking. She stood at a podium in front of every camera on the planet. Behind her, a screen showed the names of the dead, scrolling slowly. She looked into the camera and spoke 5 words that would change the history of the galaxy. "We will never forget this." She did not cry. She did not raise her voice. She said it the way a person says something that they mean with every cell in their body. Then she stepped away from the podium, and the screen behind her kept scrolling names. Vorath paused again. One of the young Talani asked, in a small voice, "Did the Union ever explain why they did not help?" Vorath let out a sound that might have been a laugh if it had any warmth in it. "They said they did not receive the messages in time. A technical failure, they called it." He shook his head slowly. Everyone knew it was a lie. The Union had received the messages. They simply decided that 58,000 humans were not worth the trouble. The young one's face twisted with disgust. Vorath nodded. "Hold on to that feeling. Because the humans held on to it for 40 years. H1. The Elder spoke of humanity's vengeance, the galactic overlooked. H2. Part 1. The Forgotten World. The old alien sat on a rock that floated between 2 dying stars. His skin was gray and cracked like dried mud, and his 4 eyes glowed a soft orange in the darkness. His name was Vorath, and he was the last living elder of the Talani people. Around him, 20 young Talani sat cross-legged on smaller rocks, their wide eyes blinking with curiosity. They had come to hear a story. Not just any story. They had come to hear the one story that every species in the galaxy whispered about, but few dared to tell in full. Vorath looked at them for a long time before he spoke. His voice was low and rough, like stones grinding together. "You want to know about the humans," he said. It was not a question. The young ones nodded. Vorath closed 2 of his eyes and let out a long, tired breath. "Then listen carefully, and do not interrupt, because this story does not end the way you think it will." He told them it began on a small blue planet, 3rd from its star, in a system so far from the center of the galaxy that most species did not even know it existed. The planet was called Earth. It wasn't special. It had 1 moon, a lot of water, and creatures that fought each other almost as often as they breathed. The beings who ruled it called themselves humans. They were soft. They had no claws, no armor, no venom, no wings. Their bodies were weak compared to nearly every other intelligent species in the known galaxy. And yet, Vorath said, they were the most dangerous thing the galaxy had ever produced. But that came later. In the beginning, the humans were simply ignored. On Earth, in a gray building in the capital city of a country called Korea, a man named Taeho sat behind a metal desk and stared at a screen. He was 34 years old, with short black hair and tired eyes that had seen too many rejection letters. He was a captain in the Earth Planetary Defense Corps, a military force that most of the galaxy did not even know existed. Beside him stood a woman named Yuna. She was younger, sharper, and far less patient. She was his lieutenant, and she was angry. "They rejected us again," Taeho said quietly. He leaned back in his chair and rubbed his eyes. Yuna slammed her hand on the desk. "That is the 7th time. 7 times we have asked the Galactic Union for membership. 7 times they have told us we are not developed enough." She walked to the window and looked out at the city skyline. Flying cars moved between tall buildings. Hospitals used machines that could rebuild bones in minutes. Children learned in schools that taught them 5 languages before the age of 10. "Not developed enough," she repeated, her voice bitter. He had stopped being angry about it a long time ago. Now he was just tired. The Galactic Union was made up of over 800 species from across the galaxy. They controlled trade, law, travel, and war. If you were not a member, you did not exist. And Earth did not exist. Not to them. The Union had sent a review team to Earth once, years before Tejo was born. The team then stayed for 3 days. They looked at Earth's technology, its weapons, its population, and its history. Then they left and filed a report. The report said that humans were a Class 7 pre-emergent species. That meant they were considered too primitive, too violent, and too unstable to be allowed into the galactic community. The report also said that Earth had no resources worth taking and no strategic value. The planet was, in the Union's official language, negligible. Tejo had read that report 100 times. The word negligible burned in his chest every single time. But life went on. Earth kept growing. Humans kept building. They sent ships into their own solar system. They built stations on their moon and on the red planet next to them. They reached out into the dark and tried to make friends with the stars. And the stars looked the other way. Yuna often said that the galaxy treated Earth like a stray animal, something to be pitied from a distance, but never taken in. Tejo thought that was generous. He believed the galaxy did not think about Earth at all. There were other humans who shared Yuna's anger. In the Defense Corps, soldiers trained every day for a war that no one believed would come. They studied alien ships, alien weapons, and alien tactics, using whatever scraps of information they could gather. Most of it came from intercepted signals and old data files that traders sometimes dropped near Earth's system by accident. It was like trying to learn how to swim by reading about water. One of those soldiers was a young woman named Jisoo. She was a communications officer stationed on a small outpost near the edge of Earth's territory. The outpost watched the sky and listened for signals. Most days there was nothing, just silence. The galaxy was full of noise, but none of it was meant for Earth. Jisoo did not mind the silence. She was patient. She believed that one day the galaxy would notice them. She told herself that all Earth needed was time. Time to grow. Time to prove itself. Time to show the Union that humans were not primitive. They were just late to the party. She was wrong about that. The galaxy would notice them, yes, but not because of anything Earth did. The galaxy would notice them because of what was about to be done to them. Far away, in a part of space that Earth's maps did not even cover, a fleet of warships was gathering. They belonged to the Dravari Dominion, a military empire that had been conquering smaller worlds for centuries. The Dravari were tall, armored creatures with black eyes and blades built into their arms. They did not negotiate. They did not trade. They simply took what they wanted. And they had just learned that 3 small human colonies existed on the outer edges of explored space. The colonies were unprotected. The Union did not care about them. No one would come to help. Vorath paused in his story and looked at the young ones. Their faces were tight with worry. You see, the elder said softly, the galaxy did not just ignore humanity. It left them out in the open, like meat for wolves. And the wolves were already on their way. The young Talani said nothing. The stars above them burned cold and distant. Vorath let the silence sit for a moment.